I'm speaking to you on the morning of my wedding day. About 6 hours, but that's not the reason that I'm here speaking to you. The reason that I'm here is Mr. Lesnick said I've been working on the book. I've been working on this book for 2 years, and the story of how I came to write the book is sort of weird and funny. I was a reporter at a newspaper until 2009. I was laid off. And as a new freelancer, I was looking for something new to write about. And I flew down to Miami I-Day 2 years ago, sort of on a lark, wondering if there was a book to be done on the subject. And you know, the further I got into it, the more interesting it became. I was interested not only as a journalist, but as someone who had done online dating and found that whole world pretty fascinating, and also as someone whose mom and dad met through the second ever computer dating system back in 1965. And so the way that I started the book is I went back to 1965 and I sort of laid out the development of business over what is now almost 50 years. And so I wanted to begin with sort of a brief history of digitally intermediated introduction to business from 1965 to 1995 until it became the online dating business. And then I'll introduce the panelists and we'll kind of leap into the topic, which is how the technology has changed and what are the innovations that have stuck, what are the innovations that have been meaningful and have really switched the direction of the industry in new ways. A brief history of digitally intermediated introductions. This is the man who's sort of responsible for all of us being here right now. He was a math major at Harvard in 1965. And despite how smart and accomplished he was a bit on the short side. He was about 5'6", 5'7". As us short guys know, it's sort of hard to meet women when you're on the shorter side. And so he was tired of coming home empty-handed from the mixers with the women's school across the way. He said, there has to be a better way to do this. And he knew of this new machine that was called the IBM 1401. And it actually did weigh 5 tons. He had no idea how to use it because back then as a math major, you wouldn't necessarily have known anything about the computer. He found a friend to do the programming and he wrote a questionnaire that he handed out around the campus. In short, the business became very successful. And within about 6 months, he had made what in today's dollars would be about $1.5 million. The industry sort of went from there. Sometimes he used the Honeywell 200, which is very similar. The computer dating business sort of thrived, and what he had disrupted was obviously not, a competitor because he was the first in, but what he had really disrupted was the culture of dating and this idea that why should I settle for the people who I happen to run into in the world every day when I can meet so many more people around me. And that was sort of what the essence of online dating is now, is this idea that we're introduced to people that we don't actually know and who we don't have any common connections with. And it thrived among college students for about 4 years, and it spread across the country. It was at the University of California, it was all over. But then the two guys who started the first two companies at Harvard, they went out in the world and they did other things with their lives. And the whole industry sort of faded away. It became video dating in the 70s, not with this machine because it was a little bit too archaic. This was actually the first camcorder ever invented in '67. It was called the Sony Portapack. I think the thing behind the camera is actually a lot heavier than it looks. You almost need a separate person to carry it or something. But a few years later, the technology advanced into VHS, and this guy on the right, Jeff Ullman, had an idea to start a video dating company, which became successful among a certain niche, but was still sort of widely derogated as this sort of ridiculous thing. I mean, who would be so desperate as to go in front of a camera to try to describe yourself and what you wanted, and then, flip through the binders of people and, look at their videos and select a date that way. So it was fairly widely stigmatized. And if you ever watched Mad TV in the 90s, which was a competitor to Saturday Night Live, they had a skit they did every week called Lowered Expectations, which was a spoof on this company. And they had people like Shaquille O'Neal, basketball player, and Dennis Rodman on the show, dressed as women, doing these videos. And they actually you can find them on YouTube. They're very funny. The company sold for something like $82 million in the mid-90s, so that was successful for him, but it never really broke into the culture, this sort of online world, in a way made this technology sort of, transitional. The bulletin board systems, some of you are old enough to maybe remember that in the 80s when they came along. This was sort of the online world before the internet. It was not a global system, so you would sort of log in through the phone. You would be introduced to folks who were sort of in your region. There was a company that came along called Matchmaker in about '83, and they had, at their peak, I think about 17 franchises that went sort of state by state. There would be the master size-up would be the guy who ran the dating service in your region, and his phone number was the phone number that you phoned into in order to access the dating pool. They didn't have photographs, but you could sort of email back and forth with people you met. That was usurped in the early 90s when the internet came along. Of course, this sort of marks the beginning of the modern era. Match.com, invented by this fellow, launched around 94, 95. And it was really sort of the first mass market online dating site. It went through a series of acquisitions, and today's owned by AAC, of course, which now controls about a quarter of the online dating industry in North America. They operate about $500 million worth of the $2 billion business.